Hello, this is Mark Grier, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the June 4th issue of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Okay, first article today. Republicans begin to test the limits of Trump's power by flexing their own. The president's unilateral and retributive style of governing is starting to hit a wall in both chambers of Congress. On a tour through Asia last fall, President Trump took a moment on the world stage to celebrate a legislative victory at home. After months of iron-fisted pressure, he had compelled Republicans to pass legislation that cut taxes and slashed into the country's social safety net. I said, put it all into one bill, and if we get it done, we're done for 4 years, Trump said during an October speech in Tokyo. We don't need anything more from Congress in terms of that. Ever since, Mr. Trump has been intent on testing that theory, daring lawmakers to defy him and doing his best to vanquish them from office if they do. But after a retributive romp through primary season, Mr. Trump's style of governing, unilateral and often impatient, has collided with restive Republicans who seem to be exacting some political vengeance of their own. On Wednesday evening, 4 House Republicans sided with Democrats to demand Mr. Trump's withdrawal, U.S. forces from the conflict with Iran, or win approval from Congress, rebuking a president who has repeatedly said he does not need congressional authorization to continue the conflict. That came on the heels of another high-profile setback, a Republican revolt against a $1.8 billion fund to reward Trump supporters who claim political persecution by Democrats. Many Republican senators had indicated that they would not move forward with plans to fund Mr. Trump's immigration agenda unless those plans were axed. This week, Todd Blanche, the acting Attorney General, said that the administration would abandon the effort. But on Wednesday, just as the Senate moved to debate an immigration bill that they had held up because of the fund, Mr. Trump told reporters in the Oval Office that he wasn't quite sure if the fund was dead or on hold. I love it, he told reporters who asked about the pot of money, effectively jamming his foot in the way of a door lawmakers had hoped to close. I think it's so important. No wonder Republicans want to put something in writing. Senator John Cornyn of Texas, a Republican whom Mr. Trump helped dispatch during the primaries, shared a Wall Street Journal editorial on social media earlier in the day calling on Congress to pass legislation to kill the fund. The way to ensure the Trump Retribution Fund is more than mostly dead would be for Congress to put a stake through it, Mr. Cornyn wrote, echoing the editorial. The senator, who has been posting up a storm about the concept of betrayal in recent days, added the word retribution, which did not appear in that sentence in the editorial. Last week, he shared a fable about a frog who was wronged by a scorpion. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, who voted in favor of impeaching Mr. Trump in 2021 and lost his primary, also supports legislation that would kill the fund. You want to make sure it's really dead, he told reporters. On other matters of national security, several Republicans pushed back on Mr. Trump's decision to appoint Bill Pulte to serve as the acting director of national intelligence. In his role as director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, Mr. Pulte publicized the personal mortgage information of several prominent Trump critics and pushed for federal investigations into them. Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina said in a CNBC interview on Wednesday morning that he did not believe Mr. Pulte has a prayer, of being confirmed by the Senate. Mr. Tillis announced that he would not run for re-election last year after coming under threat from Mr. Trump for opposing the sweeping tax bill the president crowed about in Japan. He said that Mr. Trump's decision to appoint Mr. Polte had jeopardized congressional efforts to extend a high-profile warrantless surveillance law, which is scheduled to debate later this month. I am tired of amateur hour, Mr. Tillis said of the Trump administration. Later, Mr. Tillis told reporters that I feel like there are people advising the president as if there is no election in November. Davis Ingle, a White House spokesman, defended Mr. Trump's choice. The president chooses the best and most talented people to serve in his cabinet. That is why this administration has achieved record success for the American people, Mr. Ingle said in a statement. Mr. Polte is a great selection, and he will do a great job on behalf of the American people. Mr. Ingle added that holding up a vote on the surveillance law puts America's national security at risk, and it is shameful that some Democrats are threatening to put partisan politics ahead of the safety of the American people. With 5 months until the midterm elections, Mr. Trump's advisors are betting that voters will see all of this as classic Washington dysfunction born out of disloyalty to Mr. Trump. As evidence, those advisors have pointed to the trail of politicians who found themselves losing to Trump-backed challengers. Outside of the White House bubble, others warn that Mr. Trump's primary season strength predicted on mobilized voters from the deepest red depths of his base may already be evaporating. Representative Randy Feenstra of Iowa, who received a late endorsement from Mr. Trump, lost his primary race to his challenger, Zach Lahn, a conservative political operative and farmer. Mike Murphy, a Republican strategist, saw Mr. Feenstra's loss as a sign that the administration's policies have hit agricultural communities, particularly the rounds of tariffs and rising oil prices from the U.S. war in Iran. Mr. Murphy said that those policies, compounded with Mr. Trump's unpopularity, have weakened Republicans more than the White House has admitted. He's a guerrilla in the Republican primaries, but he is a wounded sparrow among the general electorate, he said of Mr. Trump. He said this has resulted in Republican senators trying to move away from Mr. Trump's more politically toxic efforts. The real politics of this is, get me some distance from Mr. Trump, he added. Lamar Alexander, the retired Republican senator of Tennessee, who served until 2021, said that the president still has the opportunity to work with a chamber that agrees with him 99% of the time to preserve his legacy. He needs to take advice from independent-minded people rather than just people who work from him and who he can fire, he said in an interview. Purging senators who support him is not a good path towards creating a legacy that he will be proud of when he leaves. Okay, next article. Hezbollah's fiber optic drones expose cracks in Israeli defenses. The Lebanese militant group's attacks have caught Israelis off guard, forcing its political and military leaders to scramble for solutions. An explosive drone snaked between the hills of southern Lebanon before striking an Israeli armored personnel carrier. 2 days later, another slammed into a tank. 3 days after that, a third pounded into a missile defense system. Each day, multiple drone attacks attack Israeli forces, the Israeli military has said, and with lethal effect. In the past week alone, they have killed 3 soldiers. The relentless drone attacks by Hezbollah, the Iran-backed Lebanese militant group, have exposed cracks in Israelis' defenses, shocking its public and forcing a rushed search for solutions by its military and political leadership. They have sown fear among Israeli ground troops in Lebanon and challenged Israel's long-standing air superiority in Lebanese skies. The drones have also revealed a shortcoming in Israel's strategy to seize territory in southern Lebanon, build a buffer zone, and displace Hezbollah militants beyond the range of anti-tank missiles that have plagued tens of thousands of civilians living in northern Israel. The drone onslaught, however, was no surprise. As early as 2024, military officers warned that Hezbollah would likely start using drones that are controlled through thin fiber optic cables to evade electronic jamming, according to 3 Israeli officials who insisted to remain anonymous because they were not authorized to speak with the media. Fiber optic drones have also become commonplace on the battlefield in Ukraine. Despite the warnings, the military's top brass appeared to do little to prepare for the threat, the officials said. When Israeli soldiers started facing drone attacks in April, the military still had not adopted simple countermeasures that are routine in Ukraine, like suspending protective nets over stationary soldiers and equipment. 2 years ago, we discussed how Hezbollah would deploy these drones, said Guy Hazut, a reserve brigadier general who led an effort in the Israeli military to learn lessons between 2024 and 2025. But the security establishment needs to slap in the face to wake up. It largely held its fire over the past year despite repeated Israeli strikes. Hezbollah, set back by a 2024 war, has re-emerged as a fighting force. After the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran began in late February, the militant group started firing rockets and drones at Israel. The Israeli military advanced deeper into Lebanon on a bid to stop Hezbollah's attacks. It has taken over dozens of villages in southern Lebanon and carried out widespread demolitions. The Israeli military has said its attacks target Hezbollah, but Israel Katz, Israel's defense minister, said the approach in southern Lebanon was meant to emulate tactics used by the military in Gaza, where entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. Over 3,400 people have been killed in Lebanon, according to the health ministry, which does not distinguish between combatants and civilians, and the government says more than 1 million have been displaced. And yet, Hezbollah has managed to strike the military with its drone attacks on Israeli territory, which have killed at least 10 soldiers and 1 civilian since April. In a statement, the Israeli military said that it takes the drone threat very seriously and that it was trying to find solutions to what it described as a complex technology and operational challenge. Hezbollah has boasted about inflicting pain on Israel's technologically advanced military with the low-cost drones. This challenge has started to shake the occupation army. Hassan Hajza, the Arab affairs editor for Al-Manar, a TV channel owned by Hezbollah, said in an interview in May with Al-Manar. In a statement, the Hezbollah spokesman said that the drones have weakened the spirit of Israeli soldiers, and in May alone, Hezbollah published more than 30 videos of drones attacking Israeli military personnel and equipment. The videos, featuring dramatic music for maximum propaganda effect, appear to show stealthy drones zeroing in on Israeli soldiers. In one video, recorded on May 9th, A drone approaches a military post in Slomai, a town in northern Israel, and a soldier runs as fast as he can toward a fortified room. The drone crashes just as he reaches the entrance to the room. The video cuts off the moment the drone crashes, leaving it unclear whether the soldier was harmed. In response to mounting public criticism, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he had ordered the establishment of a special team of experts to address the drone threat. I told them something that surprised them a bit. You have an unlimited budget, he said at a meeting with government ministers in mid-May. However much it costs, it costs. In the past, Hezbollah used radio signals to control drone attacks, which the military could disable through electronic jamming. Now the group mounts drones with explosives and spools of fiber optic cable that unwind as they fly towards their targets, with an operator at the other end. Because these drones do not rely on radio signals, the main defense against them is to shoot them down or sever the cables. Soldiers on the ground have little time to try to shoot down the drone before they explode. The drone war came to Israel-Hezbollah front after being pioneered and highly developed in combat between Ukraine and Russia. While drones used in that conflict can fly as far as about 50 miles. 3 Israeli officials said Hezbollah's fiber optic drones so far have a range of only 12 miles. In January of last year, Ukrainian military officers visited Israel to explain how their military confronted the threat from Russia drones, according to 2 Ukrainian officials, who, of course, spoke on the condition of remaining anonymous to discuss internal deliberations. In recent weeks, Israeli officials asked Ukraine to send another delegation, but the Ukrainian government conditioned a second visit on Israel increasing support for Ukraine's air defenses, according to the Ukrainian officials. The Israeli defense minister declined to comment. Experts are now warning that the next big challenge for Israel is a tool that Ukraine is using to bring the fight to Russia and could be adopted by Hezbollah. Ukrainians have been incorporating SIM cards, like those in cellular phones, in drones for their offensive attacks on Russian territory. Analysts say that by using the mobile network, Ukraine was able to attack Russia from hundreds of miles away, and in some cases, Russia had to shut down cellular networks across entire regions to counter them. We can't wait to find a solution to this threat, said Mr. Hazut, who recently published a book about how the military has neglected its ground forces. We must act now. Former Israeli security officials said the threat from Hezbollah's drones was overlooked as attention was directed at more pressing concerns, like Iran's ballistic missile program. Israel had to prepare for many other challenges, said Brigadier General Shachar Shashat, a former commander of the Israelis' military air and missile defense forces. At the end of the day, these drones can kill and cause damage, but they're a tactical threat, not a strategic one. They won't defeat us, but they can harm our morale. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Okay, next article. Why Los Angeles' mayor, Karen Bass, has to fight for her job. Ms. Bass, a Democrat, has had a roller coaster first term. She now faces the first runoff since 2005 for an incumbent mayor in the city. Karen Bass will likely be the first incumbent mayor of Los Angeles since 2005 to have to fight for her job in a runoff. It's a sign that despite a rebound from the depths of the pandemic, voters remain dissatisfied with life in the nation's second most populous city. Angelinans were frustrated by the aftermath of last year's devastating Palisades fire and Miss Bass's initial absence during the blaze. But they are also struggling with rising costs and still see homeless encampments as a problem, even though the number of people living on the streets has fallen. Peggy Clark, 69, an accountant from Woodland Hills, said she was voting for the former reality television star Spencer Pratt because he's not Bass. Ms. Clark said that she didn't believe the mayor's claims that fewer people were unhoused in the city. They're still everywhere, she said. Ms. Bass's last two predecessors, Eric Garcetti and Antonio Villagrosa, dispatched their challengers in their re-election primaries by winning a majority of the vote. Under Los Angeles' rules, a mayoral candidate who receives more than 50% of the vote in the primary automatically wins. And Mr. Garcetti and Mr. Villagrosa never faced a runoff campaign as incumbents. As of Wednesday afternoon, with hundreds of thousands of ballots still to be counted, Ms. Bass was in the lead with about 35% of the vote. She had enough support to win one of the two runoff spots, according to the Associated Press, but was well short of the majority needed to win the seat outright. In second place was Mr. Pratt, who launched his bombastic campaign after his family's home burned in the Pacific Palisades neighborhood last year. And in third was the progressive city council member, Nithya Raman, a former ally of the mayor, who announced her candidacy just before the filing deadline. The two prominent challengers saw an opportunity this year to harness the protest vote against Ms. Bass. Suddenly, the mayor was forced to run against an entertainer with a knack for leveraging social media and a city councilwoman with a progressive base, both more formidable opponents than Mr. Garcetti or Mr. Villagrosa faced in their re-election bids. The fact that Mr. Pratt, a Republican with no government experience, who has drawn praise from Mr. Trump, has garnered significant support in one of the nation's most liberal cities is particularly notable. Mike Bonin, a former Los Angeles City Council member who now leads the Pat Brown Institute for Public Affairs at California State University, Los Angeles, said that Mr. Pratt knows how to tell a story, something that neither Ms. Bass nor Ms. Raman have mastered in this campaign. The story, Mr. Bonin said, starts with him losing his home as a result of government incompetence, then extends to a sense that government is ineffective for everyone. The master story is, government is failing you, he said, and I think his exhibit, A, is homelessness. In a runoff, Ms. Bass, would be the immediate favorite. Against Mr. Pratt, a Republican, she would have the advantage of being a Democrat in a heavily Democratic city. Against Ms. Raman, she would be more moderate candidate whom business leaders and centrist voters would likely prefer. And many Angelinas backed her in the primary. I like what Karen Bass has done since she's been in office, said Willie Harris, 64. I think across the board, she inherited a really complex scenario, and she was able to come in and unravel some of this. Still, Mr. Bonin noted that 2/3 of voters so far have looked for an alternative, suggesting that voters are broadly frustrated with government and blame Ms. Bass for their ongoing sense that Los Angeles is in disarray. He added that Being mayor of a big city is a ticking time bomb. Even if mayors start out popular, as Miss Bass did, at some point the complexities of the job catch up to nearly all leaders, including Mr. Villagrosa and Mr. Garcetti. For Karen, it's happened in year 3 instead of year 7, Mr. Bonin said. Okay, next article is from the opinion section. It's an article by Christopher Smart. The Strait of Hormuz is getting less dire by the day. Whatever peace agreement the United States and Iran may cobble together, there will be no quick return to pre-war energy flows through the Strait of Hormuz, even after the mines are cleared. It will take a brave tanker captain to trust that the passage is once again secure, and higher insurance costs could rise the price of that trip by millions. But with every passing day, the world is learning to live without the Gulf's seaborne exports. Just as the COVID-19 pandemic and President Trump's tariffs forced a significant rewiring of global supply chains, the Strait's closure has prompted a similar adjustment. You might be part of it. When gas prices rise rapidly, people start to limit their driving. Walmart just reported that customers are now buying less than 10 gallons of gas at a time on average at its filling stations. The United States, Brazil, Canada, Kazakhstan, and Venezuela are already increasing their oil production. Large releases of crude oil from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve are also helping to cover shortfalls. Like a stream that finds its way around a fallen log, markets locate new supplies when the old ones are suddenly cut off. This adjustment is hardly painless. Qatar can ship its vast liquefied natural gas exports only through the strait, and as a result, its economy may contract 9% or more this year, according to the International Monetary Fund. For the Gulf overall, forecasts for growth have been cut by more than half. Despite ample domestic supply, the average cost of a gallon of gasoline in California stations is around $6 and around $4.25 nationally, because global markets set prices. Rising natural gas costs have squeezed German petrochemical production. The loss of Gulf fertilizer, which is processed from natural gas, has delivered painful rise in food costs from Egypt to Indonesia. American farmers and consumers are facing inflation too. Markets are dynamic and always respond. First, some oil is already streaming out of the Gulf, either through the trickle of ships that make a run for it, some under U.S. protection, or through pipelines in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Those pipes have the capacity to replace as much as a quarter of normal seaborne flows. Somewhat controversially, the Trump administration has also loosened sanctions on Russian oil to ease our own pain, even if oil money helps fund Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Second, the Gulf's top Asian customers have introduced rationing and other conservative measures. China simply stopped importing for a few weeks. South Korea limited public sector workers to driving on alternate days. The Philippines told government employees to work 4 days in the office with limits on air conditioning. Australia has drafted plans for mandatory rationing should the situation deteriorate. Third, countries are scrambling to rebalance their energy mix. Before the Iran war, some 40% of China's oil imports came from the Gulf, but the country uses oil for only 20% of its energy needs and has already begun to get more from Russia, Central Asia, and the United States. South Korea dispatched officials to secure supplies from Malaysia, Kazakhstan, and Canada, while announcing plans to develop joint oil storage facilities with Japan. The Japanese government has been relying heavily on domestic reserves to cushion the blow, while cultivating alternative suppliers in Colombia and Mexico and expanding its nuclear capacity. U.S. jet fuel exports may now help European airlines avoid significant cutbacks to their summer schedules. None of this is to minimize the pain ahead for some companies and industries as inventories and government reserves run low. Refineries and petrochemical plants will inevitably struggle to get the right grade of crude. Spirit Airlines will not be the only company that this crisis tips into bankruptcy, and the outlook will darken substantially if fresh hostilities further damage the Gulf's energy production. But choke points rarely last. Mr. Trump's Republicans may and may not suffer from rising inflation as the midterm elections approach. The president seems to be of two minds. He said rising gas prices are a very small price to pay for defeating Iran. He also discussed suspending the federal gasoline tax. The longer the strait remains blocked, however, the less important oil from the strait becomes. The S&P 500 is setting records not because investors believe peace is at hand, but because corporate earnings continue to grow and American consumers, particularly wealthier ones, are still buying oil. Prices have drifted lower recently, not because traders expect a swift rebound in the strait shipping, but because they see supply and demand rebalancing. The winners of this adjustment include U.S. oil and natural gas producers that can fill the strait's shortfall, as well as nuclear and renewable energy providers. Other petroleum exporters like Brazil and Ghana may benefit too. So will Russia if sanctions enforcement continues to weaken. The Gulf nations face extended losses. Tourists can't contemplate visiting Dubai without thinking about luxury hotels under attack. Ship owners might need months, even years, to trust that the strait is free of drone risks. While it's hard to imagine a world in which the strait never reopens, it's also hard to imagine the world economy ever again depending on the region for 20% of its oil and gas needs. Desperate buyers always manage to find new sellers when the old ones can't deliver. The longer the world lives without the Gulf suppliers, the easier it gets. Okay, next article. SpaceX sets price for the world's largest IPO. The $135 share price means Elon Musk's rocket maker is poised to exceed the 2019 initial public offering of Saudi Aramco in both valuation and money raised. SpaceX, Elon Musk's rocket maker and artificial intelligence company, set a price for its initial public offering on Wednesday of $135, which would value it at $1.77 trillion and crown it the largest IPO ever. At that price, SpaceX would raise $74.4 billion from the offering, and its valuation would be more than 40% higher than the $1.25 trillion that it valued itself at in February. The current IPO record is held by Saudi Aramco, the Saudi Arabia's state-owned oil company, which was valued at $1.7 trillion and raised more than $29 billion when it went public in 2019. Most companies that go public set a preliminary price range for their stock offering before settling on a final number in case investors' demand for their shares changes. But Mr. Musk and SpaceX sidestepped that and simply declared one price for investors. SpaceX could still change that price, but it is not expected to do so. It is likely to begin trading on the NASDAQ next week under the ticker symbol SPCX. At $74.4 billion raised, SpaceX's IPO would be just about more than every U.S. IPO combined in the last 2 years, said Matthew Kennedy, a senior IPO market strategist at Renaissance Capital. A SpaceX spokesman did not respond to a request for comment. SpaceX's IPO is a bellwether for other expected offerings that are set to be enormous, including from OpenAI and Anthropic, the artificial intelligence companies. Anthropic confidently filed to go public on Monday, and OpenAI is expected to file in the coming weeks. Both startups have valuations approaching $1 trillion. The three offerings could unleash an avalanche of wealth across Silicon Valley and Wall Street, creating new corporate titans in the process. Amongst the biggest winners would be Mr. Musk, 54, who is already the world's richest man. At $135 a share, the roughly 50% stake in SpaceX that he controls would be worth just over $752 billion. Mr. Musk cannot sell some of the SpaceX shares he controls until the company hits various operational milestones, according to the firm's filings. A large increase in the company's share price in its first days of trading could turn Mr. Musk into the world's first trillionaire. Mr. Musk, who founded SpaceX in 2002, has remade the space race with partly reusable rockets and transformed communication with the company's satellite internet service, Starlink. In February, SpaceX bought his AI company, xAI, which owned his social media platform X, creating a conglomerate of the tech billionaire's various interests. Mr. Musk separately runs the electric car maker Tesla, as well as other companies. He has used SpaceX as a kind of piggy bank over the last 2 decades, securing loans from the company to himself and relying on the firm to shore up several troubled businesses in his orbit. That was enabled partly because of Mr. Musk's iron grip on SpaceX. He controls more than 85% of its shareholder votes because of a class of super voting shares, according to the company's filings. SpaceX, which has contracts with NASA and other federal agencies, has long been something of a financial mystery. Last month, the company revealed a full picture of its financial health for the first time in an IPO prospectus. The company reported that it had lost more than $4.9 billion last year, compared with a $791 million profit in 2024 because of increased expenditures on AI. Revenue was $18.7 billion last year, up 33% from the previous year. The company plans to use the money it raises from its IPO to fund various moonshots, including Mr. Musk's goals of putting AI data centers into orbit, building a lunar factory, and eventually sending humans to Mars. The New York Times sued OpenAI and Microsoft in 2023, claiming copyright infringement of news content related to AI systems. The two companies have denied those claims. Nicholas Owens, an equity researcher with the investment research firm Morningstar, said that while SpaceX's IPO was enormous, he would not be surprised if the records are broken more than once. Companies like OpenAI and Anthropic have become larger than ever before going public. $1 trillion market capitalization for a company going public used to be unheard of, he said, using a term to describe a company's valuation. Now it seems normal. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Okay, next article. Cheryl says immigration officials won't let her visit detention center. The governor said the Department of Homeland Security's actions at Delaney Hall raise serious questions. Governor Mickey Sherrill of New Jersey said Wednesday that federal immigration officials were continuing to bar her from entering a detention center in Newark, raising serious questions about what is happening behind its walls. Ms. Sherrill noted that she had met Tuesday evening with relatives of immigrants being held at the Delaney Hall Detention Center, which has become a focal point of protest against President Trump's immigration crackdown. She said that the relatives had shared heartbreaking reports of unsafe, inhumane, and unconstitutional conditions inside the 1,000-bed jail. The detainees have requested to meet with me, Ms. Sherrill, a Democrat, wrote in a social media post, and I want to meet with them. Ms. Sherrill's first attempted to enter the facility on Memorial Day, but was turned away. On Tuesday, the state's Attorney General, Jennifer Davenport, filed a lawsuit after state health officials were denied access to the medical unit and several other areas of the facility during an inspection. Ms. Sherrill's public rebuke of on Wednesday reflected the growing tensions between New Jersey's elected leaders and federal immigration officials as demonstrations outside the Delaney Hall have grown increasingly violent in the last 2 weeks. Groups of mainly peaceful protesters have gathered daily outside the detention center since it reopened last year. But the crowds began to grow after detainees initiated what they have described as a hunger and labor strike on May 22nd to draw attention to the conditions inside the facility, which is operated by the GEO Group, one of the country's largest private prison companies. The situation escalated sharply over Memorial Day weekend. The authorities deployed tear gas and wielded batons as protesters resisted calls to disperse. Ms. Sherrill made the decision to send in state troopers on horseback and on foot, a tactic that had been sharply criticized by immigrant rights leaders, and the city of Newark temporarily imposed a curfew on the streets nearest Delaney Hall. On Wednesday evening, a contingent of demonstrators continued to keep vigil on a stretch of Dormus Avenue adjacent to one of the main gates to Delaney Hall. The crowd, numbering about 75, was peaceful, even festive. Some demonstrators bopped their heads to dance music, salsa, punk rock, rap, and reggae. By law, members of Congress are authorized to conduct oversight visits at Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency facilities at will, and tours of Delaney Hall by members of Congress are common. But other public officials, including governors, must request permission from the nearest ICE field office, according to a February 2025 ICE memo. A spokeswoman from the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees ICE, said she had no immediate comment on the governor's statement. Earlier on Wednesday, Representative Anilia Mejia, a Democrat who represents New Jersey's 11th Congressional District, confronted Markwayne Mullin, Mr. Trump's Homeland Security Secretary, about conditions at Delaney Hall during a committee hearing in Washington. She said she had met with detainees during inspections who complained about poor sanitation, spoiled food, and a lack of medical care. I met detainees who not only were given their medication sporadically or had their dosages lowered without consultation of their doctors, but I met with detainees who were not even made aware of what medication they were given. Just handed a bunch of pills, she said. Mr. Mullen defended the care provided at the ICE facilities, which he said have more medical staff members than most state prisoners. It was a point that Representative Jeff Van Drew, a Republican from New Jersey, also made last week after he toured Delaney Hall. I saw good conditions, clean facilities, basic care, and a detention center where ICE and DHS are doing a hard job that keeps our communities safe, Mr. Van Drew said in a statement. Quite frankly, the conditions I saw today are better than what you see in some nursing homes. Ms. Sherrill, a former Congresswoman, made her opposition to Mr. Trump the centerpiece of her campaign for governor. In March, New Jersey became one of the first states to pass a law that bars ICE agents from wearing masks while on duty. The federal government filed a lawsuit the next month that seeks to block the law from being enforced. Ms. Sherrill has also sued ICE over a planned detention center in a warehouse in Roxbury, New Jersey. Okay, next article. EU steps up ocean monitoring as Trump administration backs away. Days after the U.S. said it would kill a network of ocean monitors, European officials pledged to invest more in their version, calling it a necessity. Days after the Trump administration vowed to dismantle a deep ocean observation system, the European Union said it would bolster its own monitoring of the world's oceans to improve climate forecasting and better anticipate changes to marine ecosystems. The European Union announcement was long in the works and not a response to the U.S. pullback. Still, officials in Brussels highlighted the contrast. To position the EU at the forefront of ocean observation is not a goal per se. It is a necessity, especially now that extremely worrying signals are coming from the other side of the Atlantic, said Kostas Kadis, the European Union's Commissioner for Fisheries and Oceans. In recent days, the National Science Foundation in the United States said it would begin dismantling a $360 million deep ocean observation system that has been monitoring marine ecosystems and the effects of climate change since 2016. That would involve the removal of 900 instruments anchored to the ocean's bottom off Oregon, Washington State, Alaska, North Carolina, and an area between Greenland and Iceland known as the Irminger Sea. The European Commission, the executive arm of the European Union, said it would invest $107 million, or 92 million euros, in ocean observation. More than half of the funding would be directed to an existing international ocean observation program sponsored by UNESCO, the World Meteorological Organization, and other groups. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, said Europe would lead the race to understand our ocean. European officials framed the benefit of ocean monitoring as going beyond climate issues, helping with marine security and defense. The program announced Wednesday is relatively small. For example, the deep sea system that the U.S. had installed a decade ago, with instruments anchored in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, as well as between Greenland and Iceland, cost $48 million annually just to operate. Marcel Brzezinski, a European Commission spokesman, said the funding was just the first step and that Europe would lobby other countries to invest in ocean observation and would host a pledging event in September. I think it's quite obvious that this initiative would be a long-term process, he said. Scientists say that ocean monitoring is an important way to understand the consequences of climate change. Rising seas pose a threat to coastal cities. Changing ocean temperatures open the door for invasive species, and scientists fear that a vital ocean current known as the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation could weaken or even collapse as a result of climate change. That would severely disrupt global weather and likely shrink the world's food supply. The oceanography community is increasingly worried about major ocean circulation changes ahead, with serious impacts on climate over land areas as well, said Stefan Rahmstorff, an oceanographer at Germany's Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. He called the European investment important and said the U.S. does not want people to know about climate change impacts. The National Science Foundation had said it would send ships this month to begin removing the instruments that are part of the system known as the Ocean Observatory Initiative. The process could take 15 months, it said. Democrats have said they intend to challenge the Trump administration's move. The system had been designed to operate for 25 years, meaning any removal would cut off more than a decade of potential data. Michael Englund, a spokesman for the National Science Foundation, said taking down the network aligns with NSF's wider strategy to have a nimbler approach to prioritizing support for evolving scientific priorities and emerging technologies. All right, moving on. Next article. Bari Weiss speaks on Scott Pelley's firing. That's the path that he chose. In her first public comments on the firing, Ms. Weiss, the CBS News editor-in-chief, said that the longtime correspondent had broken the trust in the newsroom. Bari Weiss, the CBS News editor-in-chief, told her newsroom on Wednesday morning that the network fired the 60 Minutes correspondent Scott Pelley because a foundation of trust had been broken after he assailed CBS leadership. I'm only interested in working in a newsroom that is built on trust and mutual respect. We cannot do our work without it, Ms. Weiss said on a 9 a.m. editorial call, according to a recording that was obtained by the New York Times. That foundation was broken on Monday, she continued, referring to the explosive 60 Minutes staff meeting, where Mr. Pelley said that Ms. Weiss was murdering 60 Minutes and asserted that Nick Bilton, the tech journalist hired to run the show, would never be welcome. Despite our attempts to engage with Scott Pelley and to find a way back, unfortunately, we weren't able to do so. And so we had to part ways, Ms. Weiss said. We did not want that to happen, but that's the path that he chose. These were Ms. Weiss's first remarks to her staff about the decision to fire Mr. Pelley, who was informed of his dismissal on Tuesday evening. CBS News has not issued an official statement about the firing. Mr. Pelley, in a statement on Wednesday, disputed Ms. Weiss's account of their interaction. There was no effort of any kind to find a way back, he said. Mr. Pelley met on Tuesday with Ms. Weiss, Mr. Bilton, and Tom Sabrowski, the CBS News president. He said that the meeting had turned hostile and that he believed the network had little interest in engaging with his concerns about the future of 60 Minutes. Mr. Pelley, who joined CBS in 1989, had been enraged with Ms. Weiss's decision last week to fire the leadership team of 60 Minutes, including its former executive producer, Tanya Simon, the two on-air correspondents, Shirin Alfonsi and Cecilia Vega. At the Monday staff meeting, which Ms. Weiss did not attend, Mr. Pelley said that Ms. Weiss had been brought in to kill the long-running Sunday program, and she's been doing exactly that. He told Mr. Bilton, who has never worked in broadcast news, that he had slender qualifications for his job. Mr. Bilton took umbrage at Mr. Pelley's remarks. In a fiery termination letter written on Tuesday, Mr. Bilton said that the correspondent had rejected his overtures to meet for dinner and chose ambush instead. I am here to deliver first-in-class news programming, not to make headlines about newsroom drama, Mr. Bilton wrote, accusing Mr. Pelley of antipathy about the future of 60 Minutes. Ms. Weiss, an opinion journalist with little television experience, was appointed last year by David Ellison, the tech scion who purchased CBS's parent company, Paramount. She has said she wants to modernize CBS News so that it can remain competitive in the era of digital media. Ms. Weiss, on Wednesday's conference call, took a moment to praise Mr. Pelley's contributions to CBS. She cited several of his recent 60 Minutes segments, including an interview with former Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska and an investigation into mysterious alignment known as Havana Syndrome. In the season that ended in May, 60 Minutes was among the top-rated programs on broadcast television, and its viewership was up 9% from last year. Ms. Weiss said she wanted to move forward. Those are the kind of stories that have always typified 60 Minutes, she said, and they're the kind of stories that Nick Bilton is going to put on the air come September in season 59, with the amazing team that's still there. 3 60 Minutes correspondents have been fired since Ms. Weiss took over CBS News last year. Another, Anderson Cooper, left voluntarily. 3 regular correspondents remain. Ms. Weiss referred on the call to some new people that are going to be joining us, but she didn't elaborate. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the June 4th issue of the New York Times. Your reader today has been Mark Grier. Thank you so much for listening.